boys and girls? I'm your host, Intern Rick, and it's time for the Saturday morning review, and we're having a special birthday party! Woo! Woo! It's the 30th anniversary of He-Man! Woo-hoo-hoo! And today, we're going to be taking a special look at the vintage He-Man and Skeletor figures. And as a special bonus for our newly installed Never Had as a Kid segment, we're going to be taking a look at the vintage Squeeze. So sit right back. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe made its debut to weekday audiences on Monday, September 5th, 1983. Based on Mattel's toy line that made its debut nearly a year before, the cartoon was initially passed by TV networks and eventually entered syndication and quickly became one of the most popular and beloved animated series of its time. Today, we take a look at the vintage He-Man and Skeletor figures that inspired this amazing cartoon. Alright boys and girls, here we have them. The duo that started it all, the original He-Man and Skeletor figures from Mattel. We will start our review today by taking a look at the big guy himself. Alright, so here we have the vintage He-Man, most powerful man in the universe figure. As you can see, he is pretty sick. So, we will just start by taking a look at this figure. He has got articulation at the neck here, so you can turn his head, and his head is rather squishy. We've got articulation at the shoulders, so you can turn his arms up and down. And of course, that classic Masters of the Universe action twist waist, so you can twist him and spin him. And then we've got the articulation at the hips. So that's it for the articulation on these vintage Masters of the Universe figures. It's nothing super, crazy like what we're getting on the classics figures today, but we really didn't need it back then. So the figure includes accessories that are his classic sword and shield and axe. And I've actually got his power sword neatly tucked back in his removable harness. So you just pop this here and then undo the hooks, and his harness actually comes right off. Anybody who has a vintage He-Man figure knows this. And I will note that I have actually switched the arms on my vintage He-Man with a vintage Triclop arms, so I've got the painted cuffs. I still have the He-Man arms in the package, but for display purposes I display him with the Triclops arms. Alright, so I cannot tell you how many times I lost and had to replace this figure, and it probably wasn't until I became an older teen that I actually added a complete He-Man back to my collection and actually just replaced my original complete He-Man with this one here. So now we're going to move on and we are going to take a look at the vintage Skeletor. Alright, so here we have the dreaded Skeletor. As you can see, this figure is really awesome. This was one of my favorite toys growing up and has probably been a major inspiration as to why I am a horror fan today. So I will like to note that this is the 8-back version Skeletor. If you don't know the difference, the 8-back version Skeletor over the later versions has got a black loincloth as opposed to a purple one like this, and his boots are completely painted all the way around, whereas the 8-back has only got the half-painted boots. So, just like with the He-Man figure, we've got articulation at the head, so you can rotate his head at the neck, and this head is rather squishy. There are some latter Skeletor figures. I believe the original Skeletor, the one that's the reissue that's marked the original Skeletor, and some of the later ones have got a firm head, but this one is squishy. We've got the up and down articulation at the shoulders on both arms, and then we've got the classic twist action at the waist, and of course the hip articulation. So this figure originally comes packaged with his classic Havoc staff accessory, and of course the other half of the Power Sword, which if we grab our He-Man figure and bring him back in, we can take out his sword, and by the powers of Grayskull, I command these swords unite. Bam! One whole classic Power Sword, just like with the Masters Classics line. So I will like to note with my Skeletor, I do not have his loincloth armor. I have apparently lost it at some point. I thought I had it, but it seems that I've misplaced it or lost it and I need to replace it. So, alright. In addition, of course, these figures came packaged in the classic Masters blister card pack, and each came with their very own mini-comic. So that's going to wrap things up for our look at these vintage classic pieces. These were some of my favorite toys growing up as a kid. Actually, they were my favorite toys growing up as a kid. They've been the inspiration for pretty much anything that's followed. Alright, boys and girls, what did you think? Pretty sick figures, huh? Growing up, I didn't really have a whole lot, but I definitely had Masters of the Universe, and He-Man and Skeletor were the start of it all. Absolutely love those figures. So now, we're going to take a stroll back into my childhood and look at the figure that I never had growing up. The vintage Squeeze figure. So sit right back. Not having appeared in the original Masters of the Universe cartoon, Squeeze made his debut in 1987 as part of Wave 6 of the vintage Masters of the Universe toy line. A member of the Snake Men, Squeeze is one of the last Masters of the Universe figures to be released and is often one of the most sought after. Today we take a look at this vintage treasure. Alright, boys and girls, here we have the vintage Squeeze figure. As you can see, he is very similar to most vintage Masters of the Universe figures. We've got articulation here at the head, so you can rotate it from left to right. And we've got the classic Masters of the Universe rubber band articulation here at the hips, and you can actually rotate him and get that same twist back action at the waist. However, obviously with this figure we have got a different action feature where his arms actually stretch out and bend. So you can pretty much kind of bend them in any way that you want. Now the arms do have articulation, so you can move them up and down, but it is notable that this is one solid piece that runs through his body. So whenever you lift up one arm, the other arm comes with it. They're not separate. So the figure has got the classic Snake Men insignia here on his chest plate armor, which is solid. It does not come off. It's molded to the figure. And then we have got the molded armor plates on his thigh area here, which does not open up or come off. So this figure was packaged with a pet snake accessory as opposed to the classic Snake Men staff that you would get with nearly every other Snake Men figure, and of course was packaged with a classic Masters mini comic. Alright, so that is going to take care of our look at the vintage Squeeze figure. I'm extremely happy to add this piece to my collection, never having it before, and I look forward to adding more pieces to this never had as a kid segment. Alright, boys and girls, so what did you think? It's a pretty sick figure, huh? I love how he's all green and bendy and stretchy. He's just such an awesome figure. And I love how they incorporated the idea into the Snake Crush Skeletor from the 2000X Masters line. However, I still would have loved to have seen a 2000X Squeeze action figure as opposed to the Staction, even though the Staction is really cool. So that is about going to wrap things up for this special birthday episode of the Saturday Morning Review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my amazingly awesome large hat. If not, deal with it. So if you enjoyed the show and like what we do here, be sure to check out our other shows, such as the VG Losers podcast, the It Figures Toy and Action Figure Show, the Beyond the Box Custom Toy Show, and the news desk featuring the awesome dirt. Also, if you'd like to shoot any questions or any comments our way, you can join our forums at jointheforums.com, and if you'd like to support us, by all means, check out our store at shoppcn.com. Lots of awesome figures on there. That's going to wrap things up. Until next week, I'm your host, Intern Rick, and take care.